Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Season 2, Episode 9 of the No Code Podcast. Very excited for my guest today. Gentleman I've known for a couple years now. We were about to get lunch in mid-February. I had to cancel last minute and figured we'd catch up in like a month or two from there. And then 13 months has gone by, and here we are. But excited to have my guest on today, Sean Denham, Managing Partner of Grant Thornton's Philadelphia region. Welcome to the show, Sean. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks, Tony. It's great to catch up.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Can't wait to do it in person, but this is good enough for now, I guess.
Yep. A lot of hot things going on right now. Really encouraged that we just hit April. It's a great time of the year for the auditing profession as we start seeing a kind of a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yep. I remember it pretty well from my KPMG days. And, I can remember some of those April 15th parties or some of those audit sign-off parties too. And in late March, early April, those, they got a little crazy from time to time.
They do get crazy. Last year, obviously, we had to go virtual for our end of busy season party. We're going virtual again this year.
Yeah.
But historically, we've had a lot of good times. You usually pick some bar and restaurant in Center City and celebrate a little bit.
Yeah. If people out there listening or watching that are not accountants themselves or don't know accountants, trust me, they know how to party. All right. They might not seem it, but they know how to do a proper send-off.
We do.
And, you and I also bonded over our upbringing. You're a Wildwood Crest kid. I grew up in Northfield, New Jersey, right outside Margate, Atlantic City area. And, a couple of Jersey Shore kids here that have done pretty well for themselves, I suppose.
Yeah, I think growing up in a beach town in the Jersey Shore actually helps define who you are as a person. And I moved to Wildwood Crest, New Jersey when I was 7 years old, growing up a block from the beach. All my friends, the majority of my friends are still down there. My whole family is still down there. My parents are still living in the same house I grew up of when I was 7. Me and my family, we have a shore house down there in the Crest and spend a lot of time down there and playing golf at the Shore Club down there.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, same situation here. Mom and dad are still down there. My siblings have sort of scattered about, but they still come back pretty often. And, hopefully one day for my wife and I, we'll be getting that shore house as well. We might be a couple of years off of that, but that's definitely a goal because it's so great to come back to and see so many of my buddies that I grew up with, like in your situation, are still down there. And one thing that's interesting, I don't know if you've read or heard this, but the year-round population down there in light of COVID is actually growing quite a bit.
It is. I mean, the real estate market has exploded at beach towns. And, I think we saw that this past summer. Where I am, residential real estate prices have exploded. This past, and I have some friends that are in that space. They own, one of my best friends actually owns a real estate company down in Wildwood. Cool. And, houses go on the market within 48 hours. There's multiple offers, sight unseen, because people want to be there. I think people with COVID are starting to say, okay, in this virtual world, I'm going to go live where I want to live, not live where I work. And I think this short town boom has exploded as a result.
Yeah. So my wife and I actually did it for a year. We had lived in King of Prussia and we decided we wanted to go back to South Jersey. We were both born and raised in South Jersey. And, we just wanted to run back to those nice property taxes. We really missed paying those. So, we had kind of a year in between where my mother-in-law has a house in Summers Point, New Jersey, right outside Ocean City. And, she at the time was in Chicago on a regular basis, and that was the house she'd come home to for holidays and summer and all that. And so it was kind of open, and we intended to stay maybe like 6 months. It took us a little longer to find a house than we thought. So we stayed for a year, but I commuted back and forth probably like 3 days a week to our Philadelphia office from there. And it was an hour drive. It was Parkway to Expressway. And honestly, I live in Medford now. I live 24 miles outside of the city. And in normal times, it's an hour from here. So, yeah, I mean, that's something, it's feasible. And, a lot of the schools down there are pretty good. So, Yeah, it's interesting to see that. It's on one hand, it's a little concerning because it's like, okay, in the business that I'm in, at least with commercial office space being the primary driver, it's like, that's nice for my people down the shore, but what does that mean for repopulating offices in the long run here, which is still, kind of a lack of clarity on what that's going to look like.
Yeah, that is a question. Our firm as a whole has thought about our real estate footprint, and doing national. We have about 10,000 employees across the country at Grant Thornton, and we're just like other organizations. We're doing surveys to kind of understand where our employees and colleagues want to be post COVID, and we're coming up pretty quick to post COVID. And I think the jury's still out. I think in what I've seen, what I think our firm has seen in large cities like Philadelphia, people are more reluctant to kind of go back into the office. Yeah. We have about 500 employees that sit in my office in Philadelphia. And on any given day, we have 7-8 people in the office. Wow. I mean, we're available. We're open for business. We're available. Yeah. But it's not required. And actually, we're not encouraging people to come into the office. Right. I think as a firm now we're thinking about what does that mean, and that's kind of where the surveys come in, and understanding from our people how they want to work going forward, and then how do we flex accordingly. With a really large real estate footprint we have nationally.
Yeah, it's the problem that everybody's trying to. I mean, nobody I think wants to solve it right now because we just don't know exactly when post-COVID is, what that exactly looks like. I mean, I think we're all feeling pretty good now that we're, vaccine rollout and, some cases are upticking a little bit here and there, but for the most part, hospitalizations and deaths are staying down. Hope that continues. But I mean, it is the question. And we're doing a lot of that too, survey work, not only for our clients, but for JLL internally. And I think it was a fairly early survey, but I think the number has held pretty steady that somewhere around 75% of people absolutely want to come back, but they almost all want to come back with some flexibility built in of like a 3-day in the office. Let me work from home when I can, so I can actually sit down and plow through work. And me personally, that is something that I had done pre-COVID for years. I was typically like a Monday and Friday from home, so I could kind of avoid the tap on the shoulder, time distraction of being in the office to actually get through, due dates or whatever I was working on, and like 3 days bouncing around between our 5 offices in the region, which I'm sure as an executive yourself in the Philly region, it might have looked kind of similar. But I loved that style, and I think it'd be great if we could come back with that open to more people. I just, the question is, what is the impact on the footprint? Is it a reduction in space? Is it a more comfortable space that houses less people? So in other words, taking our 50-person office in Center City and saying, okay, it's 35 now, and here's how we're going to redo the furniture layouts, and here's how we're going to redo the conference rooms and have some more, decompression space or whatever it may be. I would love to see that personally. I hope it can work. For owners and occupiers.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned you would work from home Monday and Friday. I mean, I never did. I was in the office, 5 days a week. Kind of my role is managing partner of the office. It's, you need to be with your people. You need to be in the marketplace. So I would have breakfast, lunch, and dinner almost every day. All 3 of those, coffees, meeting with clients, out at our clients, meeting with the executives of those clients. And, you kind of need to be seen. You need to be out there. So, I mean, it was a really rough transition for me in the first 6 months, trying to figure out Zoom. Everyone was excited for Zoom. Then Zoom fatigue has hit. Yep. But, I'm really curious and hopefully bullish on that, the cities will remain. There's some people are predicting that, will cities kind of die at least as they were known. I hope not. I don't think so. I think people want to be I was in the office this week, and I'm only going in about once a month now, but it just feels, I mean, there's no one there. It's a ghost town, but it just feels different being in the office. I have a little more pep in my step when I'm in the office and walking around the city, and it just feels different. So kind of getting out of the house, back into the workforce, I think people forget how much they miss it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I made it out to our Berwyn office last week, and I had some meetings and a lunch to go to out there. And there was probably 10 or 12 people in the office. And yeah, it felt great. I mean, it felt great just to see people and catch up. And, we're all doing the things we have to do in terms of, keeping the masks on at all times and all that fun stuff. But so there is that element of, weirdness with it, but it's so worth it to be around people. And I think, the big thing that's missing right now is that collaboration and exchange of ideas to, really kind of drive the creativity and drive the solutions for our clients. Like you can't really replicate that on Zoom or Teams or whatever it may be. It doesn't work
You
that
can,
way.
and it's the bumping. And I mean, when I'm in the office, I am busy every minute of every day. Someone stops by. Hey, I need 5 minutes. Can we talk about this? Hey, I want to talk to you about this client matter. I want to talk to you about this prospect matter. Can I just give you maybe even a little bit of a bitch session.
Right.
I need to pick me up.
Yeah.
And not having those everything is now scheduled. I mean, it's very rare. It's very rare for someone even just to pick up the phone and call. And it's, hey, let's get 20 minutes on the calendar. I mean, you kind of lose that bump in, and there's so much value, I think, to that bump in. And, and I know companies are thinking about this all the time. I'm not sure how your company's thinking about it, but even our first years, and I'll tell you a little secret, Tony, that very few people know. Auditing, what I do for a living, isn't super sexy. It's not.
You're right. It's a shock. Everyone's shocked right now.
I'll tell you about what is exciting and why I've stayed in the profession really my whole career. It's not always ticking and tying and doing kind of the work that what we do as an auditor, but it's being with your clients, it's being in front of your clients, it's being with your people, it's having a 9, 10, 12 person engagement team in a conference room at a client, having lunch, taking a few breaks here, having a conversation, getting to know one another. And while we've tried to continue to simulate that through virtual conference rooms, it's just not the same.
Yeah.
And there's a bond that you have when you have to work maybe some late nights and you have client deadlines and you're shoulder to shoulder as opposed to virtual. And so, companies figuring out, and on my firm trying to figure out how to replicate that. And that's what ties a person to an organization. It's those personal bonds, and living in a virtual world, especially with first years coming out of college that have never had those bonds created. It's a struggle. It's a hard struggle.
In a way, it's almost like the school issue right now. Yep. Kids at school, the ones that have had to be virtual for a year, and I know a lot of them are getting back now, but that missed time when you're at a young point in your life or career, when you're a sponge, when you're absorbing all this knowledge and information, to not have that in person, it's like impossible to replicate that. And I could see that for first, second year people in the public accounting business as I'm seeing it in real estate. I mean, if you're a junior broker and you can't be in the office learning from the people that have been around 15, 25 years, it's tough. It's tough. And we're doing what we can to continue to support them and give them the training and the skills that they need. But it is much harder for that group than somebody that's been doing it a long time, that has the book of business, that has the clients, that has the relationships, that still might have a bad year or two, but knows they can get through it. They can come out the other side in good shape. So yeah, that's a huge challenge. So you mentioned some of the stuff you guys have done internally, and what for your clients was kind of the initial message as COVID was hitting versus what you're doing now? How has that kind of evolved over the past 13 months in terms of how you're advising your, critical clients on how they're conducting their business? Curious about that.
Yeah. I mean, we are advising clients, but, our clients are going through, there are business issues. I think a lot of those business issues were addressed early on. Do organizations, do companies have the ability to be virtual through technology, et cetera? I think And that was obviously table stakes early on in the pandemic. I think now as we come out, I think organizations, including ours, I'm sure including yours, is how do we retain the profitability that we've had?
Right.
And a lot of companies have actually seen revenue may be down, but profitability for some organizations have been up. And it's been up because all of the operating costs are no longer there, right? Those meetings and conferences that cost a lot of money to attend in person, they're not attending, or they're attending virtually, and it's a fraction of the cost because of travel and hotels, et cetera.
Yeah, T&E adds up. T&E and marketing are big line items.
T&E adds up enormously, and I think organizations have realized that. Now, how do they not necessarily give that back, but also translating that of some of the benefits of being in person as well? So what does that mix look like? Through the pandemic, and even still currently on certain manufacturing companies and distribution companies, supply chain, incredibly important. But I think that a lot in not just their immediate supply chain, but the supply chain throughout the life cycle of the product or whatever the offering they may be giving. But I think companies have figured that out for the most part. Now that we've been living in a year, so now it's okay. We weathered the storm. Our revenues are back on up to an uptick. Profitability has done well. How do we maintain that? Or if things have not been great financially for them, what do we need to shift? And so these little moments, I think, throughout the life cycles of an organization, those reflection points are so critical. And what we definitely saw, and I think maybe we're going to see again here shortly, is there are these different markers in an organization's life cycle. And what are those markers? Well, everyone has a kind of a 5-year plan, a 3-year plan, and that was disrupted. Now, how did they flex? Who could flex quicker? We're about to hit another reflection point of kind of going back to work, the country reopening. The companies that I think can leverage that the best or capitalize that on the best are the ones that always come out the best. And so that's, I wouldn't say what we're advising. Those are kind of the questions we're asking. Questions around scenarios. So scenario planning has been hot for years,
right? But
companies really have never, I don't want to say it. I mean, a lot of companies never kind of went through it. They had the scenario planning in their mind, but putting pen to paper. Yeah. Well, we're about to hit some new scenario planning. And how are companies thinking through that? That's a lot of the things that I'm talking to boards about and about to C-suite about.
Gotcha. No, that's really interesting. I think what's interesting too is to see how some companies, this was a very tough lesson to learn, and certainly a painful and costly one for a lot, but to see how some companies have innovated through this and actually tweaked their business models to enhance what they were doing before the pandemic is really interesting too. My last guest on the podcast was Ryan Simonetti, the CEO of Convene, which is a co-working provider and hospitality administrator for offices and office buildings around the country. They've done some really interesting stuff in terms of how they're pivoting their company to be more on the services side and less reliant on really the physical real estate, and more of like what can they provide to a building owner and tenants to increase their experience of occupying space. And something like that to me is really interesting. They had to take some hard hits. I mean, they had to really let a lot of people go and reshape their whole business model. But I think they're going to come out of this in a great spot because they had a chance to step back.
That's exactly
and look at things differently,
Yeah, and that's, maybe I didn't as eloquently as you said it there, Tony, but I mean, that's kind of what I was saying in those different reflection points. In the beginning of COVID, companies were forced, although they had always kind of thought about, what different scenarios could I face, but they were forced to actually take action.
Right.
And and I did see that podcast and webcast that you guys had done. I thought it was fantastic. I thought he was amazing. But and I think companies are now preparing for what's next.
Right. Yeah, it's no, it's pretty interesting to see, and kind of separating the really innovative companies from some of the ones that are sort of, they were stuck in their old ways, and they're maybe too big or cumbersome to be able to kind of pivot and adapt. But we'll see. I mean, time will tell. I think post Labor Day into the fourth quarter is really going to, when we get a lot of the answers to the stuff we're talking about right now. But
Yeah.
we shall see. One thing I wanted to talk about is your career track at Grant Thornton in particular. You've been there about, I think, 17 years now altogether.
That sounds right. Yeah,
Yeah.
2004.
If your LinkedIn is correct, then that is correct. But that's a hell of a run. How has your whole, career track kind of evolved there at Grant Thornton in terms of, where you started, how you climbed the ladder, and some of the newer things you're working on, which we talked about offline a little bit, that I'm excited to get into a bit.
Yeah, so I've had a relatively long career. I've been in public accounting in different ways since '94, graduating Lehigh in '94. So 27 years, and I noticed through COVID that I'm getting tremendous amount of more gray hair than I had pre-COVID. So I'm definitely starting to feel some of the years. But yeah, I've been with GT for 17 years. I started my career in the firm's SEC group. Well, started my career at Grant Thornton in the firm's SEC group in Washington, D.C. All things kind of financial reporting, SEC questions from clients, et cetera. So, which was a great learning experience. Then made partner in the national office of the Northeast region of GT. So Philadelphia, Boston, New York. I was working up in Edison, New Jersey at that point. Did that for 6 or 7 years, and then got an opportunity to become the assistant managing partner in New York, and then did that for a year. That leadership team did some really fun things and some great things, and our CEO asked me to come to Philly. So been in Philly for 7, 8 years, have worn a lot of different hats in the firm. But I think the number one thing that I can look back and, having a successful career, and hopefully it's not done yet, but having great mentors who really take a shine to you or see something in you or just invest in you. And I have been so lucky in my career from day one coming out of college. I started my career out of Lehigh at a firm called Amper, Pollitt Senior Mattia, which is now Eisner Amper. But one of the founding partners, or the fourth partner, this gentleman by the name of Peter Freitag, was just a great partner to me. As a first year out of college, he called me Scott. I tell him all the time that my name's Sean, not Scott. But he would give me little projects to do, like basic accounting, technical issues, and he'd give me homework assignments. I'd go do them and come back, and 9 times out of 10 I had the wrong answer. But he knew the answer. It wasn't like he needed help. He knew the answer. But he just really had put his arm around me early in my career, and I've had those throughout my career. Went to Ernst & Young for a while. In their M&A practice in Manhattan, went back to Amper for a period of time before going to GT. And I've always had, either a partner, or it didn't even have to be a partner, or just someone that looked out for me.
Right.
And I think that's just so critical. And I believe so much in mentorship and having a buddy. And, some of my best friends in the world to this day are people I've met at where I've worked, and they've gone on to do bigger and better things and have stayed connected with them and have been able to do business with one another. But, I have been afforded some really fun, great, cool opportunities in my career. And I really attribute that to the people like Peter, like Karen French, who used to be in our SEC group and was a managing partner and helped me get the partner, and a lot of great people in my career.
Yeah, that's and one thing you mentioned, which I think is interesting, is the mentorship. It doesn't always have to come from a C-suite level, and sometimes a peer mentor is kind of the best thing you can have too. I know at JLL, I have somebody, Denise Dexter, in our Carolinas region, that is COO of that region, as I am CEO of JLL Philadelphia. We touch base once every 2 weeks, share ideas, struggles, problems, challenges that we face, advice back and forth to one another. And like you, I've had a lot of those those senior level mentors over the years that are, a couple steps above me in career trajectory. But sometimes it's that peer on kind of on your same level that you can get a lot out of too. I'm sure you've experienced some of that at Grant Thornton as well. But that can be incredibly valuable when you have somebody to sort of share those pain points and challenges and struggles and positive things too.
So totally. And I think, being a part, so Grant Thornton's a partnership, and being a part of a partnership, it's truly that, a partnership. And, my peer group is my partners, and being able to kick ideas around, brainstorm. I spend a tremendous amount of time working with our business development executives who, I call, have an idea, bounce ideas off them. And that's what's fun. That's what kind of gets me going every day is, what's the new thing we're going to see? Who are you going to run into? What's the new relationship you're going to build? How can you help an organization? How can you help a person? I had a phone call this morning with someone who joined Grant Thornton 9 months ago. And she is amazing and has done some really great things and has written some articles. And so I just offered myself up to her to say, hey, how can I make you successful?
Right.
My job is to help you. So just like Peter put his arm around me 27 years ago, I found it rewarding and incredibly important to do the same thing for our people as they join the ranks.
Yeah, I think that's critical. You have to, as you rise in the organization, you have to give that back too, and it creates a better overall culture. It creates, and it's not bad for yourself either if you're known as somebody that mentors others and helps raise other people's careers. That's just a positive all the way around. I've always tried to do that too. One of my favorite things going to JLL now is I have an analyst team of 3 people now. We had to kind of reduce down from about 7-person team last year, kind of pre-pandemic, and then a couple of them sort of went into other roles or what have you. But they are like 24 to 27 or 8 in that range, and it's the first time in my career that I've felt a little bit older. Me being I'm only in my late 30s, so I'm not. I think I'm doing okay so far. But to have people that are 10 to 15 years younger than me, and to see how they grow and evolve, and some of the mistakes they make too, that I'm always sure to call out because they have to learn from them. But at the same time, in the beginning, I called myself being a little too rough on them, and then kind of remembering some of the stuff I would do back in the day and be like, all right, well, I did plenty of that stuff back then too, and worse. But it's so fun though. It's so rewarding to be able to manage and supervise and mentor people like that, and see them grow too, because they grow fast. Like in the span of a year, some of the things they were struggling with, whether it was time management or organization or staying on top of multiple projects, it's amazing how quickly they figured that out in a short period of time. And that's fun to see.
Yeah, it's probably really rewarding for you to see too, because right, you've probably been a mentor to them over the years, and as I get further along in my career, titles mean less, personal accomplishments mean less, and it's really about the accomplishments of the team. And I take enormous pride of seeing a first year that has 10 years later, 12 years later becomes a partner. There's nothing more rewarding than seeing that growth. And that, what you said there really resonated with me. But seeing that growth of someone in over a period of time, or them getting their first major win on a proposal, really exciting, right? And being on that first proposal and making sure that, I take the time to kind of work with them and make sure their success becomes my success. And it's been a fun ride, even to see my own personal development on how I've shifted from maybe being a little bit of a me person and less of a me person to more of it's really about everyone else and everyone else's success.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. I mean, for me personally, it's probably been the last 2 to 3 years where I've started to make that shift. I was so I was so focused on my own stuff. Like, what role am I in now? When can I get promoted? How much money am I making? Why am I not making more money? Just kind of just zeroed in that selfish desire, which I don't think is necessarily wrong, because you have to build a career, and you have to build yourself up first, in my opinion, before you could really start passing along that knowledge and that mentorship to others. But what I found was when I shifted outward more, instead of just being so me, inwardly focused, I started to grow more individually than I did before, and then all this, I started doing my job a lot better, I think, is what it came down to. And I started getting more accolades, and it wasn't until I kind of took a step back and realized, well, I stopped making it all about me. And I started trying to figure out, like, how can I grow other people's careers? How can I grow our platform at JLL without just trying to think about how I can cash in on that? It was more of like, how can I be a brand ambassador? How can I support more nonprofits? And even when I'm networking, when I go out there, not looking so much for JLL business, but how can I help somebody else?
Yeah.
Because when you do that, number one, it's rewarding. Number two, it's the right thing to do. Number three, a lot of times it comes back to you, you know?
Yeah, definitely from a networking standpoint, you have to give before you get. That's it's an old adage, but it's a true adage.
Yeah. So how much, I'm curious how much of your role you would say is outward client facing, business development oriented versus like the management of the practice? Cause I assume you really have to wear two or three or four hats in what you do.
Yeah, I mean, our firm shifted a few years ago, so the O&P role is definitely more about our people. So
Mm-hmm.
our people in Philadelphia and about growth, and
Yeah.
so that's where I do have a few different hats. So one being as the O&P, it's all about our people.
Right.
It's also about growing the pie, so which I take great pride in. So the bigger the pie gets, it's not about profitability for my pocket. It's about profitability, like I said, of creating more partners, allowing other peoples to achieve whatever they want to achieve. Right? I've been afforded amazing opportunities in my career, so allowing others to be afforded those same opportunities is what that for me the O&P role is about.
Right.
And then I'm also an audit partner, so I also have a pretty large book of clients that I serve, and so that takes up a tremendous amount of my time. And then the other piece is about kind of revenue growth for the firm, so supporting our senior leaders of the firm, our CEO, our partnership board, and just overall my other partners. So trying to make sure. I think if I can help them be successful, the entire firm becomes successful. But so that takes up the majority of my time. And recently I took on this other role in the firm, kind of helping the firm stand up our national SPAC practice.
Right.
And so that's been really rewarding. You can't open the Wall Street Journal or any publication without reading about SPACs, which are special purpose acquisition companies. This is not a cast on SPACs today by any stretch, but that's been taking up a lot of my time. Right. So with the explosion and the rise of the SPAC, private companies thinking about a way to go public through a SPAC versus a traditional IPO, and talking to a lot of great investor groups and sponsor groups that are considering creating a SPAC and going to the capital markets that way. But so that takes up probably about 100% of my time at GT.
Gotcha. Yeah, the SPAC stuff is super interesting. I mean, I know they've been around a long time, but I don't think I was even aware of them at all until maybe 3 months ago when I'm listening to a Wall Street Journal podcast on SPACs. I'm like, what is this? You just give a bunch of money to some people and then they go public, but they don't tell you what kind of company they're going to go buy. It was so interesting and new for me to hear about. But it's one of those things, like, once you hear it once, I just kept hearing it all the time.
Yeah.
Just kept noticing it in the news, or Bloomberg or Wall Street Journal or whatever it may be. And so I kind of been following it and just trying to gain an understanding of it. Nothing to do with my role at JLL, but I'm sure it'll play into the industry somehow at some point. But just a really kind of really interesting, I guess, concept that's been around a while, but recently kind of took on more popularity.
Yeah, and we won't go into it today as we talked, I guess, on the pre-call. But yeah, I mean, it's not new. To your point, it's been around a long time, but there's been some certain tweaks to the way SPACs are viewed, SPACs are looked at, especially with pipe transactions coming into play. But it's an interesting vehicle for all life cycles of the company. Earlier stage companies are considering it, kind of that middle market or upper middle market, really where GT focuses. It's very, very popular. But even for some larger companies, I mean, DraftKings went public about a year ago. That's one of the bigger names.
Right.
It's some of the large names that have gone public via a SPAC have one of our clients, Utz. It's public information. They went public back in August via a SPAC. And so it's just an alternative, a new vehicle in order to access the capital markets.
Yeah, that's cool. And Utz is a great product. Love their pretzels.
I love
their what's that?
I love their cheese curls.
Oh yeah, those are good. I like I think the Utz Old Bay potato chip is my favorite one of all the Old Bay chips by far. I could eat a full bag of those, no problem. Won't feel that good afterwards, but it'll be delicious when I'm I'm doing it.
A lot of brands. The Voodoo. They have Voodoo chips.
Those are great.
Yeah. So they've got a few different brands, but they're fantastic, and they have a great management team, great leadership team, and really happy for their success.
And a local company too, right?
Local company, yeah, out of the central PA area.
Yeah, that's cool. Very cool. So a lot of people over the last year or so have, this whole COVID situation has forced us into, a way different daily life than we were used to before. I'm curious on the personal side of things, you and your family, what was the adjustment like? First of all, having you around all day, were the wife and kids just like trying to push you out the door as much as they could, or did they like having dad around and enjoying your time? And I'm curious what kind of other personal things have happened in the last year or so.
Well, it's definitely been I believe it's been COVID's not a blessing by any stretch, but on a personal note, being, I would leave oftentimes before the kids wake up, and I get home kind of after dinner, and that's kind of a lot of our lifestyles, especially working in the city and commuting, et cetera. But so I think it's been, on a personal note, it's been a bit of a blessing, spending more time with the kids, being more involved in some of their activities, being part of their homework a little more, having dinner with them. I've got two young daughters, 12 and 10. And, one thing that I'm very passionate about is DE&I. And so spending a lot of time with the girls, talking about equality, understanding what was going on last year in Philadelphia and nationally with some of the deaths, specifically George Floyd, which was really a catalyst for a lot of things that happened. But being able to have those conversations with them, as opposed to coming in the door, still having work to do, it's been great. And we were able to spend the summer at the shore. I got to play a lot more golf. And I'm not sure my golf game got much better, but I love it. It's a passion of mine. And I think you got to identify those silver linings. And I think we've all experienced them in some way.
Yep. No, I agree with that. And for me, I think a lot of the same, a lot more time at home with the wife and the pups. And our oldest dog, Bella, is 11 and a half, and she has cancer right now, and she's doing okay with it. It's a mast cell cancer. It's pretty manageable, but you see her slowing down too, and that's tough and it's sad. But I think about, like, if I was still working a normal schedule, how much less time I would have had with her as, she goes into probably her last year or so. And, she's been a part of the family since 2010. So, stuff like that is, you can't replace that, that extra time we've all gotten with the people and animals that we love. And, it is something to be valued. Sure. Like wasn't worth the cost of this whole thing. I've said that many times. I mean, the human cost of what we just had to deal with, despite the silver linings, it's not a trade I don't think a lot of us would make,
Yep.
but at least it helped us prioritize, I think, reprioritize a lot of things. I know for sure that, I've already started talking to some people. I have some stuff on the calendar, in-person lunches and a couple of dinners here and there, as I have the fortune of being fully vaccinated about 8 days from now as my second shot. And, but I still I'm already pumping the brakes a little bit, because it's like, I don't feel like I can just reload the calendar like I did before and wind up like doing too much of a 180 on what we've got going now. It's almost like, I think I prefer the smaller inner circle these days, and I want to add back, but I want to do it carefully and slowly, and not just do my old thing where I accept every coffee and every lunch and every dinner networking event.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that brings this conversation almost full circle. We have these different data points in our lives, and we faced one a year ago. We're facing them periodically, but we're about to face one again. So you've got to make a personal decision. I've got to make a personal decision on what the future looks like. What value are we going to take from this current last year? I love spending time with my kids, and this has afforded me the opportunity. Am I going to go back to working in Philadelphia, getting there at 7:30 in the morning, coming home at 9:30 at night, 5 days a week, going to black tie events Saturday nights in the city for various causes? Am I going to do that? Maybe. I don't know. But I mean, I think we all. But what I think is really cool is I think society as a whole has become more accepting of personal choices. And so when everyone said, it's 6:00 at night in the middle of busy season, you're leaving. Why are you leaving? Right. And to be able to get on VCs with prospects and clients and your colleagues and see dogs barking, where before that was an embarrassment, now it's accepted and it's actually welcomed. Like
it's humanizing.
It's humanizing. Yeah, I love seeing people in sweatshirts and sweatpants and kind of seeing what my colleagues' houses look like. And
right.
It's kind of neat. And I don't think anyone wants to lose that. So we need to adjust on what do we want as a society going forward.
Yeah. How do we strike a balance? I mean, I think a lot of people don't love the current setup because we all we're social creatures. We want to be back with one another, and we want to see one another, and we want to, see our friends and our extended families and all that. And we should do that. But yeah, let's maybe figure out, each individual has to figure out where their balance is and say, okay, for me, I'd like to go back to like you said, I want to be in the office on a regular basis. But if I got to come home at 4:00 because we're going to do something fun around the house, or we're going to have an early dinner or something like that, I can take my next call from the road. I can sign on later on a Zoom or whatever, and find a better equilibrium.
Yeah, truly a work-life balance. I mean, that term has been thrown around for 30, 40 years. But, it's more of a work balance, and work, maybe life balance. And so I think I do think society and employers are going to welcome that. And by the way, I think they're going to be forced to. I mean, whether they like it or not, I think they're going to be forced, because the workforce is going to demand something different. They're going to demand a different lifestyle.
And there was a war for talent before we got into COVID. There will be maybe a bigger one after. And I mean, the workplace environment is going to be a huge part of that. I mean, it's funny. We've been and I may have even sent you some of the stuff back in the day, but as of like 4 or 5 years ago, maybe more, one thing JLL would try to sell is this notion of, paying for premium space in a premium building in a premium part of town. On paper, to a CFO may look like a negative P&L impact. But if you think about the employee satisfaction, the productivity, the recruiting, the retention, some people would get it, forward-looking people would get it, forward-looking CFOs, but a lot of people would just say, oh no, well, that space is, it's 40% higher than this Class B building in the suburb. It's like, well, I mean, now we're going to have an even bigger focus on that. It doesn't necessarily have to be like super expensive space. It just has to be, how are you going to design your workday for people?
Yeah.
What does it look like? What amenities are they going to have? What comforts are they going to have, while making sure the productivity stays high? So I think it's going to be super interesting.
Me too.
Yeah. Well, listen, man, it's been awesome. I really appreciate you jumping on here. I'm super happy for your success at Grant Thornton, and I know more is coming. And I can't wait till you and I can get back together. We'll do a drink, I think, this time instead of a lunch, or both. I don't know. It's a new world. Post COVID, it'll be a new world. But
I look forward to it.
I really look forward to it, Sean. And congrats again on all your success over the years. And appreciate everybody tuning in today.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.